let's get started. We'll finish up hopefully today most of Birchat's Kohanim, but I want to start last week. I forget who asked me what Sela. What the word Sela means. So I did not so. I mean, I did a little bit of research, and I found out the basic answer is nobody knows. No, nobody knows what Sela is, what it means, what it's doing here. So I'll just very briefly show you the beginning of the article of the Jewish Encyclopedia. I know people know what it is. My in-laws actually have an actual like the books, like from I think it's not the Encyclopedia Judaica, which I have sitting right next to me on my lap, but the Jewish Encyclopedia I think was published in 1905. It's actually quite an amazing. It was very, very good, like a very top scholarly. I've read bits and pieces. So I'll just show you a little piece they have, and then we'll move on to what we're doing. But I just found it interesting. Sela, okay, term of uncertain etymology and grammatical form of doubtful meaning. Okay, it occurs 71 times in 39 psalms. It appears in Tehillim like an Ashrei V'techo et Yalucha Sela, right? 79 times in Psalm, yeah, I guess two for each one, or almost two, and three times in Habakkuk. I didn't know that. That's it. Tehillim and three times in Habakkuk. It says where it is. Technical term, curious terms are not known. That the reason that this curious was not known even by ancient versions, hold on, is evidenced by the variety of rendering given to it. Hold on, just wait a second. Okay, that should be it. Okay, anyways, so here they start giving the Greek. Well, obviously, I can't read this. And that goes through all the different ideas. So, what modern views? Nor is there greater unanimity among modern scholars than among ancients. Only on one point is there agreement. Has no grammatical connection to the text. In other words, it has no influence on the meaning of the text. It has nothing to do. This is what a lot of people say. It's either liturgical, musical mark, or sign of another character with bearing of the reading of the verbal form of the text. So that's actually quite interesting. That basically Tehillim is our songs, Ashrei V'techo Yalucha Sela, right? When I was like in elementary school, that's how we used to daven. That's why you know Ashrei by heart, right? So it's a song. So Sela was some kind of liturgical note. By the way, neither the Art Scroll or the Koran Siddur actually translate the word. I guess they had no idea what to say, so they just ignore. Or either they write Sela. So in some assume they say nothing, or they just write Sela, Art Scroll and Koran. They don't say what it means. It's kind of funny, and there's no note. I don't know why I didn't put a note on the bottom of the page. So why I didn't think of this 15 years ago, I don't know. But thank you for bringing it to our attention. Some say it's like a pause, well, that's sort of, you pause here, kind of like the Parsha breaks in the Chumash. I saw one explanation, somebody said it's like saying Amen. Ashrei Shoytecha Od Yalucha. We should praise God. Ashrei, blessed are those who sit in the home Od Yalucha Sela. They should be Amen. Okay, whatever it is, Sela just seems to be some kind of literary, liturgical note on that. Okay, so we started last week. We started to Birchat's Kohanim, and we began with the question: is Birchat's Kohanim the end of the 18th bracha or the beginning of the 19th bracha? It's nishtahei nishtahir. It's like in the middle of nowhere. It's very strange, right? And we know we only say it at Shachrit. So is it, and every other bracha, the Shemon Esrei, ends with a bracha. This doesn't. And we just finished Hatov Shimcha L'cha Ne'elo Hodot. So it apparently isn't part of that bracha. But maybe it's, so you want to say it's an introduction to Sim Shalom. That could be, and that's how some explain it, that this is really, Sim Shalom begins at Birchat's Kohanim, and there clearly are connections between the two. But it is kind of interesting. You have this sort of insertion, like Yala V'Yava. Whenever we have an insertion, we put it in the middle of a bracha. And the one assert, like when we have on a fast day where the chazan says Aneinu on his own, so we end with a bracha. There's an extra bracha in that Shmona Esrei in the morning, and we say it in the middle of Shema Kolenu. So it's kind of a little bit, interesting how Birchas Kohanim is sort of set aside as a totally separate concept. Now, where does it belong? So this already was discussed in the Gemara. So let's take a look at the Gemara in Megillah, which we should really, I guess, when we finish the Shmon Esrei, which in a few weeks, please God, we'll come back and maybe we'll do more of this. This is we right at the beginning we pointed out this is the main source, Megillah 17b for the Shmon Esrei that was originally composed by the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, talking the beginning of the Second Temple period, 6th century BCE. They composed these 18 blessings, and then Rabbi Gamliel, 700 years later, asked who can compose an extra bracha against the heretics, whatever. We spoke about that at the time, Vilam al-Shinim, and Shmuel HaKatan. Shmuel HaKatan who said, Bin levecha al tismach. He didn't really say it. He just quoted a verse in Pirkei Avot. Shmuel HaKatan is famous. What's Shmuel HaKatan famous for? He said, Bin levecha al tismach. It's very interesting. All the other people are famous for something they actually said. All he did was quote a pasuk in Mishnah. It's very nice. That was his life's motto. Do not be rejoiced at the downfall of your enemy. And as Rav Kook beautifully explained, we said at the time that only somebody who has no hate towards the enemy can write a prayer, compose a prayer to curse the enemy. It's such a powerful idea. I think it's very important in modern times, right? We have to defeat the enemy, but it has to be done. Someone who normally would love the enemy, who gets no joy that the enemy has to suffer. We have to hurt them because we have no choice. But only someone that's Rav Kook's beautiful explanation. That's why Shmuel HaKatan had to be the one to compose. Why come Rabbi Gamliel? I imagine if Rabbi Gamliel had composed it, we'd be in trouble because Rabbi Gamliel is like the exact opposite of Shmuel. He didn't tolerate anything from anybody. Yoshua, go stand in the corner. He break Yom Kippur because you want to challenge him. The truth of the matter is, Rabbi Gamliel was the leader necessary at the time. After the destruction temple, a generation or two later, Jewish life was in chaos, and who knew if it could continue? It would be anarchy. And we know this group went away, that group went away. We didn't come out the totally united people, and people were lost to Jewish history. Gamliel was a really, really strong leader. It's a little bit too harsh, and they impeached him for a while, but that was in times of uncertainty and crisis and what the Jews had gone through with the destruction of the temple. They needed a leader like Rabbi Gamliel, but he understood himself that he's not the one to compose the bracha. Okay, so anyway, so in the Gemara in Megillah doesn't have the Mashinim, but it has all the other 18 brachot, and it goes through it. So the Gemara says like this: Umaru lomar Birchat Kohanim achar hoda'ah. Why do we say Birchas Kohanim after Modim? Hoda'ah. So they quote a pasuk in Vayikra, Vayisa Aaron et yadav al elam, and Aaron lifted up his hands. That's like Birchas Kohanim. Vayivarchem, and he blessed them. Vayered me'asot chatat v'olav ashlemim, and he came down from doing the offerings, the sacrifices, the sin, the burnt offering, the peace offerings. So after Ritzei, that's kind of Ritzei, the Ritzei Hashem, Utfilatam, Yishei Yisrael, the sacrifices, the burning of the sacrifices, he came down and he said, Birchas Kohanim, so therefore we have to say Birchas Kohanim right after Ritzei. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara first asks, okay, say it before Ritzei. He says, no, we can't say it before Ritzei. It says, Vayered me'asot. He came down after he came down, then he said it. So the Gemara says, okay, so why do you stick Modim in the middle? If he did the Korbanos and he blessed the people, we should say Ritzei Hashem, and either say the bracha v'techazena inenu then, and then add the Birchas Kohanim, or I don't know, incorporate the Birchas Kohanim into the bracha of Ritzei. What are you sticking in Modim for? So that was the Gemara's question. Lema lachar avoda. So the Gemara says, no, you can't do that because it says zoveach toda. You sacrifice and you give thanks. Zoveach toda, right? You separate after, or so you sacrifice to a korban toda, but it's sacrificing and thanksgiving come together. So where it says, okay, why do you follow that? In other words, you have two sources. One source would say to say Birchas Kohanim right after Ritzei before Modim, and one says right after Ritzei you have to give thanks. So which one is it? Why do you do one over the other? Of course, so you're going to ask that question, whichever one you do. But Gemara says it's going to give a reason. My chazi to samachahai. Why do you do this one? do that one. The Gemara gives a very fascinating answer. Mistabra, in other words, they don't have any proof. Mistabra, we think logical, make a logical argument. You're right. Either one could have gone. We could have said Birchas Kohanim before Modim, but Avoda v'Hoda'a Chad Miltahi. Service of God and saying thank you is one thing. They go together. That as soon as you say, as soon as you talk about the sacrifices, immediately you have to give thanksgiving. That it's one theme. It's nothing. It's right. In other words, what the Gemara seems to be saying, I think, pretty clearly, is that avodah, service of God, means to say thank you. That's giving thanks to God, and that's why, and the korban toda is in that sense the most important of the sacrifice. We mentioned a few weeks ago. The Midrash says that in Yemot HaMashiach, all the sacrifices will be abolished except the korban toda. It's like one of these wild midrashim because it goes against what the Rambam says, right? The Rambam says nothing's going to change. But people went against the Rambam. People before the Rambam and after the Rambam, they didn't shake in their in their seat because the Rambam said something. They disagreed. The Midrashim that disagreed. So that there is this idea that in the future there'll only be the korban toda. Rav Kook develops this idea. Perhaps he's not sure that in the future there won't be any animal sacrifices. This is the whole idea. Rav Kook was a vegetarian, which he wasn't. Right? People. I mean, I never met him. He died in 1935. People in the know. Apparently, Rav Kook was not a vegetarian. He said that vegetarianism is an ideal. In the ideal world, people will be vegetarians, but we're not in that world yet. We're in the world after the flood. We're in the world of Noah. So this idea that zevach and sacrifice and thanksgiving, and the korban toda in this sense is the highest level of thanksgiving. So they go hand in hand. It's very interesting because I've said many times that the Rav Soloveitchik would often stress that prayer is all about asking God for our needs. That's Shmoneh. Prayer means asking God for needs. Thanksgiving is very nice. I don't think it's really a contradiction, but prayer, we ask God for our needs, but the idea of service of God, right? Avoda and tefillah are not the same thing, right? Avoda and hoda are one. Service of God is thanksgiving. We also pray to God. That's a form of service. We call prayer avoda shebalev, but avoda has a broader connotation. Avoda doesn't only mean prayer. Prayer is avoda, but avoda is more. So that's where it says avoda v'hoda is one thing. So we say ritzei, so we have to say modim. So we have no choice. We stick in Birchas Kohanim after modim. That's what we do. So I just saw David. You pointed out that the Mishnah in Tanit. So I believe I have that here. We'll take a look, right? That they would say Birchas Kohanim more often. So here you go, right? Very good. B'shlosha prakim, thank you. B'shlosha prakim b'shana Kohanim nosim ekapheim arba pamim b'yom. 3 times a year, the Kohanim duchen, right? And of course, the way we do it, okay, you live in Israel, David, so you get duchening every day, where the Kohanim actually bless us. We just have the chazan saying what the Kohanim would say. They do it 4 times a day. What are the 4 times? Shachrit, Musaf, Mincha, Nilata, Sharim. The 4 times you can duchen would be when you daven Shachrit, daven Musaf, daven Mincha, Nila. So what's the only time that can be? I would have thought only one time. Nila is only on Yom Kippur.
And Yom
So
Kippur.
yeah, but in the time of the Talmud, I won't get into how the Gemara reinterpret, whatever it is. It's not so important, all the technical detail. But the straight reading of the Mishnah, Taniyot, they used to say Nila on all fast days. Ne'ilah was not just a Yom Kippur davening. We today only do it, of course, on Yom Kippur, but on all fast days. And remember, this is Mishnah Tanit. On Tanit, most of the fast days of Tanit were not the fast days we know. They're fast days for rain or other disasters, other impending disasters. There was a plague. That's one of the things you have to fast for. There's a plague. There are wild animals roaming. The Mishnah lists off all these things. So I assuming that includes those fast days too. They would say Ne'ilah and the Mamadot. What are the Mamadot? And of course Yom Kippur. So the Mamadot, many people, I think Jonathan Sachs has this in his introduction, and I believe I first saw it, this book that I've quoted a few times. I think is a fantastic book that just people don't know about it anymore. To Pray as a Jew, Chaim Levi, Chaim Levi Donin, right? What's that his name? Yeah, Chaim Levi Donin. He's the one who wrote To Be a Jew, which was like a classic book, like in the 1970s. If you wanted to introduce somebody to Judaism, there was no better book than Chaim Levi Donin's book. I think he passed away relatively young. He was a rabbi in Detroit, and then he made Aliyah, I think in the late 60s, early 70s, and whatever. And then he wrote this other book, Great Jews. Got basics, but it's really fantastic. So I think that's where I first saw it. The Mamadot are the origin. The Mama are the origins of prayer. Mamad, to stand. That's the Mishnah goes on. We're not going to go through all the Mishnah. It explains that we bring a korban tamid. We bring an offering to God every day. Who's it brought on behalf? It's brought on our behalf. It's brought on behalf of the Jewish people. We're sitting in the office. We're doing investment banking, and they're being. Well, what do we have to do with it? So there had to be representatives of the Jewish people for each of the sacrifices. So the Kohanim, Levim, and Israelim. That's where we get this 24. That was just a convention. There's no holiness to them under 24. I think it was originally 16. Then they increased it. You have to divide how many people you have, how many people you need. So they divided the Kohanim, as we know, into 24 mishmarot. But they also divided the Jewish people into 24 ma'amadot, right? So you had a corresponding group of Kohanim and Yisraelim. The Mishmarot, of course, of the Leviim, but the Leviim and the Kohanim went to the Beit HaMikdash, and the Yisraelim, they stayed in their towns, and they said they used to go to shul that week, and they used to read Bereshit. They used to read the story of creation, because this is what kept the world going, and these are the Mamadot. They would gather together, and they would fast. It was like intense prayer. And that's a lot of people say this is the sort of origin of communal prayer, the origin of the Beit Knesset. So in the Mamadot, when those people, so in other words, 23 out of 24 people were not doing that. Like there was just a rotation. Every 24 weeks, your turn came out. You went to shul that week. Everybody gathered together in the shuls. That's the rest of the fourth parak in Mishnah Tanit describes how the Mamadot worked and how they read the Torah and etc. They didn't have it on Friday. What days don't you do Mamadot, etc. And so that later develops into the probably the Beit Knesset in many ways, Tfilah B'Tzibur, and that's when they used to duchen. They used to say Birchas Kohanim there. So the reason why don't we say Birchas Kohanim? I'll let David pipe in if he'd like to. He doesn't have to. Why we don't say Birchas Kohanim at Mincha today? Okay, I understand. We don't daven Nila. We don't daven Musaf most days. So Taka in Israel, when they daven Musaf, the Kohanim do duchen. Everybody knows on Shabbos they duchen twice, Shachin and Musaf. So and we don't have Nila. So do the beard? I think they duchen in Israel on Yom Kippur Nila. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do shuls duchen Nila on Yom Kippur? It depends on the shul. I seem to vaguely remember that, but I'm not sure.
It's very difficult. You have to get to Birkat
Right.
Kohanim before Shkia.
Right.
It's very hard to.
But in theory, they would do that.
Many people do.
Many people do that. Yeah. So why don't we do at Mincha? What don't we like about Mincha?
There is a chashash that one is drunk.
Correct. So thank you. There, of course, is that one who is drunk, and the halacha.
Unless it's a fast day.
Right, of course, because then we don't have to afraid they're are drinking. That's why they duchen at Shachrit.
No, even on a fast day, most poskim say one does not duchen at Mincha Gedola. Mincha Katana, yes, not Mincha Gedola. Even on a fast day. Rosalovich gave one of his shiurim Zechar Memorizal on this topic.
Oh, very nice. That I'm not aware of. Thank you. I have to. Okay, but because we say Sim Shalom, we say Sim Shalom on a fast. See, we'll have to discuss later. Sim Shalom is connected. Whenever there would be quote unquote duchening, we say Sim Shalom, which what we do on a fast. And the Chazan says Birchas Kohanim here in outside of Israel at Mincha on a fast day. They do say Birchas Kohanim. So I just assumed the Kohanim were always duchening. That's very interesting. I mean, we're afraid at Mincha Gedola they may not continue the fast. Is that the idea?
It takes them 50 pages, but it's
okay. I got you.
Low plug.
Okay,
we don't make a distinction.
A low plug. Okay, I got you. But the Mishnah says we duchen, and it has to do. We're afraid they had something to drink, and the halach is very strict about this. The halach says you have a revit. It's like 3.4 ounces. I mean, different versions, whatever. But the 3.5 ounces is very little wine. That's it. You can't duchen. That's why in most shuls in America they duchen at Shachrit on Simchas Torah because the way our shuls operate, the laning and they have kiddush in the middle. The time you get to Musaf, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, people have had a few drinks, and so therefore they push the duchening to Shachrit. I imagine Rav Soloveitchik would have been opposed to that too. I don't. Rav Soloveitchik was, as we've discussed many times, a stickler for every minhag, and he didn't go for the way we do things necessarily. Okay, so I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. Marty, you want to say something? Yeah, I want to ask.
Uh, I'm going to go out on a limb, but I'm going to say even here in Kusa Art, Nusa Spark says Shim Shalom and Dukkan and Mincha every day.
Where maybe in the Sephardic world you're saying. I don't know.
No, like what we call Nusa Spark.
Right. No, Nusach Sfard does not, as far as I know. I've never heard of that. But the Eitot Mizrach, listen, that's our next little topic, right? But the Sfardim, okay, the real halach is you're supposed to duchen every day. And duchening is not mitzvah tluya ba'aretz. I mean, I understand why we might associate with the mitzvah to the land of Israel because it connects to the temple. So like Truma, Shemitah, Maser, okay, it's for Eretz Yisrael. But that's not true. I mean, obviously, I don't have to mention this is the perfect week to talk about Birchas Kohanim. We're reading Parsha Naso, which is where Birchas Kohanim comes from. We're going to read it tomorrow in Shul. So, but it's not a mitzvah hatluya baretz. It's not land dependent, and therefore the mitzvah applies in Toronto and New York and everywhere every day. We'll discuss in one moment why the minhag is that we only do it here on Yontif. But my understanding, and I know people have told me, the Sfardim, the real Sfardim, not Nusach Sfard, they do duchen here in Toronto. I think the Sephardic Kehillah Center, they duchen every day. I don't know if anybody in Toronto has been there. Zev, I've never been, I've gone once in a Friday night here and there. I've been to one of the Sephardic shuls, but I don't recall ever being one. That's actually interesting. Only when we go on our trips to Morocco, then I daven with the Nusach, they Eitot Mizrach. But here in Toronto, I haven't done that. But I do think they do duchen every day. Okay, but anyways, that's the idea of duchening. In theory, you could do 4 times a day, 3 times a year. On Tanit, Mama Dot, and what was the third one again? Yom Kippur. Oh, no, what did it say? Now I forget what it said. But okay, now let's just do. Hold on, I just got to check because I can't believe I forgot. Yeah, I was right. Tanit, Mama Dot, and Yom Kippurim. Okay, so why do we duchen only on Yontif in Chutz La'aretz? You're supposed to duchen every day, and I don't know if people are aware. The Vilna Gaon, who was really, I know this is not how we normally associate with the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon was the Vilna Gaon. I mean, that's he was the Vilna Gaon, but he was a revolutionary in many ways, and that's the basis of Chaim Soloveitchik's fantastic seminal article, even 28 years later, Rupture and Reconstruction. He talks about the Vilna Gaon was very revolutionary. I mean, I don't know if he uses those words, but he wasn't accepted. His psakim were not accepted. Because he overturned the Shulchan Aruch in a lot of places. He was a genius, and I have to write. I quote others. I disagree, and he instituted a lot of practices that were just not accepted. Part of the article is they started being accepted in the 1950s. Some of the Vilna Gaon had like a delayed reception. But I'm sure many people know that when you go to Israel, and David, I'm sure, can attest to it, many of the minhagim are the minhag hagra. This has nothing to do with the land of Israel. I don't want to say it's not politics, chas v'shalom. I don't mean, but it's just the reality. When you establish a new community, you do whatever you want. The rabbi, who's the founding rabbi of the shul, he sets up the custom. Then they get very hard to change. The Vilna Gaon was the one who sent his top students, with the exception of Rav Chaim of Volozhin, sent him to Israel, and they set up the old yeshuv is all from this. I mean, not Hasidim also went, but much of the old yeshuv comes from the Vilna Gaon. So they follow the practice of Vilna. They had nothing to do. If he wouldn't have sent them to Australia, they would have set up the Minhag Egra in Australia. It's nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael. So they don't say V'shamru on Friday night. They don't say Baruch Hashem L'olam Amen. All these different minhagim. So the Vilna Gaon tried to introduce duchening every day. I know they have stories to Vilna Gaon and then somebody else, and there was a fire. I don't have all these weird stories. And then they say that was like a sign, min hashamayim, that no, don't do it. I think there were 2 attempts because Ani Avarchem, God blesses us every day. It's not related to Israel. But the Maisa, for Ashkenazim, not the Sephardim weren't worried about it. For Ashkenazim, we only do Chana on Yontif. Why is that? Anybody know why?
Because you have to be besimcha, and they said the Kohanim, you can't be fully besimcha over chuslars.
Okay, very good. So this is an amazing thing, right? Thank you, you, Susan. So let's take a look. It's actually in the Ramah, who lived in Chutz La'aretz. Rav Yosef Karo lived in Eretz Yisrael, so it's a very, very different, right? But this is the Shulchan Aruch 128. So it's very interesting. Kohen apal pishu panui. Even though the Kohen is single, he's allowed to duchen. How many people heard of the custom that a single person shouldn't duchen? Only when you're married. Like you only put on a tallis when you're married, right? Even though, so the Shulchan Aruch says, even though he's single, he still duchens. Okay. Well, obviously, there's a reason you think he wouldn't duchen. So Haggadah, so the Ramah says, "V'yesh omrim, no, he can't duchen. Single person shouldn't duchen." I've never heard that. I don't know if anybody practices this. The sharui below isha, sharui below simcha. This is, traditional Jewish teaching that don't go over so well in the modern era. That somebody who doesn't have a wife, let's be broad, and someone doesn't have a husband too. Whatever. Sharui below simcha, can't have full joy, can't be complete joy. But mavarach yesh lo liyot b'simcha, and you have to be in joy. Why does he have to be happy? Why does the one who blesses have to be happy? You don't say, I don't daven, I'm not in a good mood, I don't want to daven. Wait a minute, I'm not happy, I'm not besimcha, so I don't do a mitzvah. Who ever heard of such a thing? It's ridiculous. I'm not besimcha, I'm not going to keep kosher, I'm not going to eat matzah. I don't sit, I'm really unhappy sitting in the cold in the sukkah. So there, maybe, there's some circumstances. Well, what kind of narishkeit is this?
Maybe because you have to bless ba'ahava.
Very good. Excellent. So that's the explanation. I believe I heard this first from Rabbi Berglas, Mayor Berglas, I think. I hope he's well, living in Israel. He was my Rebbe. He taught me Mishnah for 4 years in high school, and then made Aliyah. He was the founder of Michelalet Orot, or one of the founders of the Chutzart program, and then, he founded Midrash Moriah. Anyway, so... so you have to bless ba'ahava. You have to bless with love. And in order to have love, you have to have joy. It's a beautiful idea. And of course, a Jew should always be happy. Remember, the Ramah, this same Rav Moshe Isserlis, the last 4 words, I believe, in the Shulchan Aruch or Chaim, are Tov Lev Mishta Tamid. A person should be joyful. Mishta, partying. It's in Hilchah Purim. The idea, and then he begins Shivita Hashem Lenegdi Tamid. God is before me all the time. And as Rav Soloveitchik saying, Simcha emanates from being in the presence of God. Usmachtem Lifnei Hashem Shivat Yamim. By Lulav, you take it one day, but where there's joy, you take it for 7 days. And halachically, that's defined as being in the presence of God. What's that? The Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash is where God dwells. So when one is in the presence of God, one is joy. I mean, that's the halachic ramification, but obviously it means broader ideas. And therefore, you take the lulav for 7 days. So simcha is connected to being in the presence of God. That's yontif, of course, also yontif, but that's only when only then you can have love. There's a special halacha. You have to bless somebody else, to do something myself, eating mat. I don't have to be simcha, but if I'm doing it for somebody else, I have to be simcha. What you give tzedakah, we'll come back to that maybe. It's not totally true either. I don't have to give tzedakah. It's nice if I do. Okay, so you have to be besimcha, and therefore a single person is not besimcha halachically, whatever. And but the Ramah says the minhag is, and I think that's the minhag in all our shows, you do duchen, even though he's not married. Someone who's very frum, he's very machmir, he's really depressed, he's not married. you don't protest. We have this expression like every once in a while. If he doesn't do it, we don't like it, but we're not going to protest. He has what to think, but he has to walk out of shul. He shouldn't sit there as a Kohen when they're calling at Kohanim and he doesn't go and say, I'm single. And then the Rama adds, and remember, the Rama was living in Krakow in the 16th century. Because then we're happy. The tov leiv, that's the expression, a good heart, hu yivarech, that's a bless. You have to be in a good mood. Masha'en came b'shar yamim, afilu b'shabbatot. Even on Shabbos, people it's a very depressing Ramah, if you think about it. People are depressed or they're not happy, whatever. Shetrudim beharhurim al michyatam. They're worried, they're thinking day and night about where their next meal is coming from. Economic times were tough. It's as if on Yontif we don't think about it. Like on Shabbos, people, even though not working, they're thinking, "Oh my God, it's tough. The economy's good now. The economy's terrible, and half of them are starving, so we can't be happy." Somehow on Yontif they rise above there. Maybe we have no choice. If we don't do it, we'd never ever do it. And I guess maybe he doesn't want to totally do away with the mitzvah. So he says, okay, Yontiv. I imagine some people are also worried about their next meal on Yontiv. By the way, you should know, it's interesting though, the Ramah himself was very wealthy. The Ramah came from a very wealthy family. And as we've mentioned many, many times, generally all the great Torah scholars throughout history were very wealthy. For the simple reason is if you didn't have money, you couldn't sit and learn. It wasn't like they didn't have 10,000 people in Kololim, and they learned better. When you needed someone in your either you had to be wealthy or your mother-in-law had to be wealthy. I've mentioned many times the Marsha, right, took his wife's name, Edels, because when they got married, his mother-in-law said, "You sit and learn, I'll support you." So says he couldn't have written a commentary in the Talmud if not for his wife's mother-in-law. So he took his mother-in-law's name. Well, what's my name? I'm a nobody. I mean, it's just an interesting idea. There's no halacha. You have to take your husband's name. The wife has to take the husband's name. The wife can take the husband's name. They can make up, the husband can take the wife's name. They can make up a joint name, dual name, do whatever they want. What the only thing Rav Schechter did tell us, I remember, he told us they should have the same last name. When a couple gets married, they should identify as one. So you shouldn't have, today we have a lot of that. The wife keeps her maiden name. I'm not, okay, so, but I'm just saying, I remember him telling us that. But he said, you want to combine names, sometimes combine names, have dual names, Beseder, Bakasha. But anyway, so it is interesting. The Ramah himself was very wealthy. And that's why there's a Ramah shul. There was like a family-built shul. They had the cemetery in the back. If you've ever been there in Krakow, and there were family members were buried. But most Jews weren't like that. So we're too worried about our economy. If there are too many tariffs, you don't do it. I know that's what he says. And they're not working. They make a fire. Listen, this is why you begin to understand when the reform movement did away with Yontif Sheni, like. They didn't oh my God, like they hated Yontif Sheni. No, it was really hard. Jews couldn't get jobs. It was, we all know, those are old enough. No, there was discrimination there against Jews. Law firms wouldn't hire Jews, and, everybody knows medical school. So to take off another day Yontif was very, very hard. Often it had tremendous economic impact on you, like horrendous economic impact. And, it's only the Rabbanan, and we have a fixed calendar. Like the argument is not insane. And had it been said by the Khatam Sofer, I'm not saying he would have said it, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Rabbanim, like, quote unquote, there was no orthodoxy, but Orthodox Rabbanim could have said, come up with the heter. I know it sounds wild, but wilder things have happened. But obviously, once the reform did it, then it became the worst thing in the world. But you understand where they're coming from. When we read the Ramah, we cancel Birchas Kohanim. We cancel the whole mitzvah. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to bless people every single day, and the rabbis canceled the mitzvah. Well, that's Reform Judaism. They canceled the mitzvah because mood. I'm worried about your mental health. I'm worried about your emotional well-being. You're not into it. That's wild. That's. But anyways, Vafilu Yontav Rishon, Vafilu Yontav. and even on Yontiv, you're still worried about your economic condition. Ein nosim kaveh ela b'tfilat musaf. Shachrit, not good. By musaf, the davening's so beautiful. You said Hallel, and they're singing, and I mean, I hope it, whatever. Sheyotzi mazmi beit knesset, and we're going to eat soon. There's going to be big kiddush, cheesecake, v'yismechu b'simchat Yontiv. And it's interesting, divrei atzmo. So this is actually fascinating. They're always the Ramah. When you look in the Shulchan Aruch, always tells you, like here, he quoted the Mordechai. The Mordechai was a Rishon. He was killed at the Crusades. He was martyred in the Crusades. But he's in the back of the Gemaras. He's in the back of the standard Gemara. It was an Ashkenazic Rishon, the Mordechai. So he's quoting the Mordechai. It always tells you. Now the Ramah didn't write those. Those later editors put it in. So here they put in, he doesn't have a source. It's on his own. The Ramah, this is what he thinks. He's not quoting any earlier sources. And then he says in Shachrit and Musaf that you don't duchen. The Shat says the duchening. That's what we do. Yivarach Hashem, etc. Here. And he says on Yom Kippur, this is Yoshbimo Kapayim Kamo B'Yontiv, V'yesh Mekomot Shenosim Kapayim B'Neila. See, they also do it in Nila, on the Yesh Megon, even at Shachrit on Yom Kippur. Like the Mishnah says, on Yom Kippur, you do it 4 times a day. Shachrit, Mincha, Musaf, Nila. So this is, I think, a fascinating Ramah, and it's really a depressing Ramah, and how economics, Jacob Katz, I have to reread this up, the famous historian. I don't know, are people familiar with Jacob Katz's work? Everybody familiar? Exclusiveness and Tolerance Out of the Ghetto. He was the Gadol Hador of
The Middle Ages.
Yeah, and more. And the Shabbos Goy is a fantastic book he wrote. He learned in yeshivas in Hungary. He was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Came to Israel. He was a professor at Hebrew University. Chaim Soloveitchik was one of his top students. Chaim Soloveitchik, in one of his books, I forget, writes, I'm writing this book for 3 people, because only 3 people are going to really understand the book. And they were his father, Rav Soloveitchik, I were Shaul Lieberman, at that time at the seminary, and Jacob Katz, who was his Rabbi in history. And Jacob Katz, one of his specialties, he was a social historian. One of his specialties, among many, was the writing of understanding history through Tshuvot. He would analyze what Tshuvot were written in the 14th century in this country and there in the 16th century. Why are rabbis addressing these issues? He would analyze Tshuvot historically. Not, I guess, when he was younger, he learned them halachically. Obviously, he was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. All his books are fantastic. He passed away about, I believe, 25 years ago or so. And but he trained the whole generation. All the top historians, are students of him. So why am I quoting? Oh yeah. So Jacob Katz, one of his sort of theories is a lot of you look in Tosfot a lot, and you have this in the Ramah. Every other Siman in the Ramah. Hefsed Meruba. If there's going to cost a lot of money, you don't have to observe this halacha. So he has that in a lot of laws. When you go for smicha and you learn your adeya, so a little bit of milk falls in the meat pot, and what's on top, what's in the bottom, all these calculations. So the Ramah would often write, we should be strict, you shouldn't eat it. But if it's a poor person or there's a loss of money or it's Erev Shabbos and you don't have time to cook, you can be lenient. It's it sounds almost like, okay, yeah, we can bend the law. It's about reform people. Yeah, when it's too hard, you change the law. He does say that. Yeah, absolutely. So what does that mean? It means, so the way Rav Shachter's paint does, it means really you're allowed to do it. Really, it's always allowed. But okay, we should be strict. But, you have to know when to be strict. Sometimes being strict is just too difficult, so you don't have to be strict. But I can understand why today somebody would interpret that in a slightly different way. But Jacob Katz really develops the notion that how much economics did influence the poskim. Rabbeinu Tam, when he would say a lot of things, he paskined the way he did because of economics needs. And I don't think that's anything like the HaTorah chasa al mamonam shel Yisrael. The Torah has pity and concern for the monetary well-being of the Jewish people. So it's an interesting. I am not to discuss with poskim how much does economics play a role. But Jacob Katz, that's one of his theories. Anyway, but that's a powerful Ramah, but it's really quite an amazing Ramah. Okay. All right, so let's discuss one more thing very interesting. Birchas Kohanim must be said in Hebrew. If you mention a couple of weeks ago, I told you that how Masechet Sota is such a fascinating Masechet. Also this week's Parsha, Birchas Kohanim this week, Parsha Sota this week's Parsha, Nazir. We just have to talk on Nazir, but I don't have that here to talk about Nazir. But and I said, even though Sota is kind of, it's also a tragic, it's really a tragedy that there. I don't care if she's innocent. Maybe that's even a worse tragedy. I don't know. The husband suspects the wife having an affair. It's just the whole thing is awful, right? But yet the half of the Masechet is fascinating. There's so much material beyond Sota. So the last 3 chapters talk about it because it's based on this Mishnah. Here the Mishnah says, "Elu nemrim b'chol lashon." So these things you can do in any language. This is what it's doing here. That's what we call like a kovitz. You have a Mishnah, and then it goes A, and then from A is connected to B, and then you go A, B, 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 C, D, E, F, G. So we talked about the first 6 chapters talked on Sota. So the Mishnah says Sota, when the Kohen, when they read to her, the warning, they can do it in any language. Makes a lot of sense. If you read a warning to somebody, you'll be cursed if you do that. If they don't understand the language, it serves no purpose. So obviously the Sota has to be said in any language. Okay, all the other things, Shema, you can stuff it in English, Tefillah. This was another big fight when the Reform movement started. Then they produced the prayers in German, and the Mishnah is very clear. That's no problem halachically, but we know the arguments go beyond halacha. Birchas Hamazon, you can say Thanksgiving, pray, Shema in any language you want, fine. And then the Mishnah says what you have to do in Hebrew. Mikra Bikurim, again, we're still on Shavuos. That's because this is the national homeland of the Jewish people. We're expressing, thanking God for taking us out of Egypt to bring us to Lebanon. So that, even if you don't understand, you have to know, that's Hebrew. That's the language of the Jewish people. Chalitza, very interesting. Brachot uklalot, that's Har Grizim and Har Eva, when Moshe at the end of, towards the end of his life. Birchas Kohanim. Okay, Birchas Kohen Gadol is on Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol lanes. Parshat HaMelech, I believe, is by Hakel. Egla Arufa, they find a dead body, and they have to make this whole ceremony. Mashuach Milchama, it's also very interesting. I might have said no. The Mashuach Milchama, the chaplain, the chief army chaplain. They had a special chaplain of the army, a Kohen. Mashuach, we call him the Mashuach Milchama, as opposed to in the Beit HaMikdash. Bashash, that's the one, if you built a house, go back and don't be afraid, and God is with you, so etc. So Birchas Kohanim must be said in any language. Now, there's one other thing. Okay. Birchas Kohanim must be said in Hebrew. Again, it's God's blessing right? The Kohanim are just they transmit God's blessing, right? They're just the messengers. So again, God created the world in Hebrew. It's interesting. The halacha insists it must be in Hebrew. So then the Gemara, this is just the Mishnah in Tamid, which talks about the Korban Tamid, the daily sacrifice. And again, this sort of transmits eventually into what becomes our Siddur, into Shachrit. Amar lehem hamamun, means the appointed one, the chief, the Gabbai of the Kohanim. Baruch bracha, make one bracha, which Gemara exchanges avarabba, okay, before Shema. Vehem baruch, they bless. Karu aseret hadvarim, read the aseret hadira, which I'll get to in 1 second, since we just finished on Shavuos, even though it's not directly connected to what we're doing. Of course, Shema, Avaya im Shamoa, Bayomer, say the 3 blessings of Shema. Baruch et ha'am, shalosh brachot. Okay, Emet v'yatziv avoda ubirchas kohanim. They said Emet v'yatziv, that's what we say after the Shema, Gal Yisrael. Avoda, that's the sacrifice. We talked about it. We quoted, right? Aaron came down for making the avoda, and then they blessed the people. That's exactly the verse we started our shir with. And birchas kohanim, and they would say birchas kohanim. Okay, so you have already in the Mishnah, going back, that this was part of the daily service of the temple, of course, which we've recreated in Shachrit, and that's why it should be done every day. So just let me show you one more fascinating source, I think, if I can find it here. Yes, okay. So here, this is a Mishnah in Sota, later on from what we did. Birchas Kohanim Ketzad. How do they bless the people? What was Birchas Kohanim? So we know Yivarach Hashem v'yishmerecha yer Hashem panei v'lechem necha. We hear it all the time. So the Mishnah says like this: Medina means outside of the temple. There's a famous dispute. The Rashi and the Rambam: is Jerusalem part of the temple, or is Jerusalem part of outside of the temple? It's also very interesting. What is Jerusalem? Is Jerusalem's main important because it houses the temple? Or no, it's Jerusalem. That's where the temple is. It's nice. It's very nice. But Jerusalem has its own. It's the capital city, etc. Okay, there are implications that not for now. Or mimot shlosha brachot. So we say three. Yivarach Hashem v'yishmerecha yer Hashem panav v'lechu yichanecha umimigdash say brachat. So how did that translate? So I actually have to check exactly. It was one blessing. It wasn't divided into three. Hold on, I just lost the source. What happened here? Yeah, okay. B'mikdash omeret Hashem kichtavo. They would pronounce God's name, not the way we pronounce. We don't pronounce the Yud K Vav K. We substitute. But of course, in the temple, you said God's name as it was. B'Medina, they said it like a nickname. B'Medina Kohanim nosim et yadayim keneget kitveihem, and in the when they duchen in shul, they have their hands at their shoulder length. Ubemigdash al gabei roshim. But when they're in the temple, they rose their hands above their heads. Chutz mi kohen gadol sheno magbiat yadav lamala min hatzutz. But the kohen gadol could not do that because one of the extra four pieces of clothing, a regular kohen wore 4 pieces of clothing, and the kohen gadol had 8 pieces. So one of the extra 4 pieces was known as etzitz. That was like a beautiful golden bracelet that said Kadosh Lashem, holy unto God. He's the one who's most dedicated. And we know in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, Kadosh means to be separate. You're separated to God. The Kohen Gadol's not even primary, his only service to God, right? There's a very, harsh halacha, a very difficult halacha that, unlike other Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol cannot go to a funeral of his parents. He's not allowed to become Tameh even for his parents. Regular Kohanim, yes, but the Kohen Gadol, min hamikdash lo yetzeh, he's not allowed to leave the temple. Does that mean ever to walk outside? I don't care what it means now. But the verse tells us the whole essence of the Kohen Gadol, unlike regular Kohanim, we work 3 days a year. The regular Kohanim were teachers, civil servants, etc. The Kohen Gadol is embodied, is in his complete identity is wrapped up in the temple in God's presence. So he doesn't have a normal life. He can marry, and of course, even if has halachas, he has to marry a virgin. A regular Kohen doesn't have to marry virgin. The regular Kohen also has, we know, restrictions on marriage, but the Kohen Gadol has greater restrictions on marriage. So the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to raise his hands above his head because he can't put his hands above the tzitz, can't put his hand above where it says holy unto God. And then Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Okay, it says Vayisa Aaron at Yadam Adam V'Yirachem. That's the same passage. When Aaron came down from bringing the sacrifices, he blessed the people. Okay, so that gives you a little background of Birchas Kohanim when it was said very often. Of course it's connected in the temple, as everything was connected to the temple, but everything else got transferred outside the temple, and for reasons the Ramah, why we only do that on Yontiv and only at Musaf on Yontiv. That's the common practice. Although, like I said, the Vilna Gaon tried to change it, other people tried to change it, and we saw the Ramah. He made it up on his own. It really goes against the standard verse, but it's a fascinating concept. He even allows a single person. The single person is not in the mood, right? You have to be Abba. You're blessing me with love. If you're not in a good mood, your love doesn't work so well. You can't express love. So the single person doesn't do it. And that's really quite amazing. Here's the fourth time. But because we just finished on Shavuot, I know once this guy, and I'm sure this came up before, where was the source, right? We talked about what they did every day, right? They, where was that source, right? Tell me that they said the Aseret Hadibrot, right? Every day they read the Aseret Hadvarim, right? That the 10, quote, what we call the 10 Commandments. And I'm sure everybody knows, why do we no longer say, we discussed this actually many months ago, why is the Aseret Hadibrot no longer in the Siddur?
Why? That's the only important thing.
Right. Taromet Haminim, the complaint of the heretics, of the sectarians. They're going to say, what you still say, it's not in the Ten Commandments, can't be so important. So we're not giving a shir now on the Ten Commandments. We had actually last week for Yemina, but I just want to point out, I find this comment so wow. It was like, I'd like to share with you. It's only indirectly related to Birchat Kohanim. So here, this Gemara, it's a Gemara in Brachot. We discussed at the time. Korim Aseret Hadibrot. Here, the Gemara in Brachot is quoting the Mishnah that we just saw in Tanit. Shema vayem Shema vayomer avod Birchas Kohanim. Amar Rav Yehuda af the Gvulim rikzu like likorken. They also wanted to do the Ten Commandments outside of the temple. No, we've already annulled them, saying the Gemara in other places. We've already said they cannot say it because of the complaints of the sectarians, right? The grievance of the heretics who argue that the entire Torah, with the exception of the Ten Commandments, do not emanate from God. That's what everybody says. And then it goes on 5 times. Rav Natan said they wanted to do it, and they didn't allow them. Rabbi Birchat said they wanted to do it in Surah. Now we're in Babylonia 300 years later. They want to say the Aseret Adibrot, and Rabbi said you can't say it. A Maimar wanted to do it in the heart. It's amazing. Like everybody wants to put the Ten Commandments, divine revelation, the essence of the Torah. How could it be that we're not going to include it in the Siddur? So everybody kept trying. Everybody kept trying to get the Ten Commandments, and they wouldn't let them. They wouldn't let them put it in, and we don't say it. I think some Siddurim have it printed. I don't know. I don't know if you're allowed to print it in the Siddur or not, because paper might say it's very interesting. So I'm going to read you the comment of the Ben Yehodaya. Anybody know what the Ben Yehodaya was? I didn't know. Anybody know? So the Ben Yehodaya is the Ben Ish Chai. Yeah, he's the Ben Ish Chai, the famous, most important posek in Iraq. He died around the beginning of the 20th century, a little over 100 years ago. He was really a gadol shabigdolim. He was like the Rav Chaim Ozer, the Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, and he was he was like, wrote the Shulchan Aruch. Ben Ish Chai was the gadol dor. Till Rav Avadia Yosef came in, he did away with a lot of things he said. Okay, so he wrote a Aggadic commentary on the Talmud. So on this Gemara, he quotes this thing, and then he says like this. Umilvad Perush Rashi, aside to the standard explanation, right, that the heretics would say that's the Torah, Shayu Korim Tagar Yisrael. So he says like this. Near Ali, it appears to me that the Torah Shayu Korim Tagar Yisrael, they would complain on the Jewish people. Every day you say the Aseret Hadibrot, and you bless upon them. They're part of the. I don't know if they made a special bracha. I'm not sure. They said, or it's in the bracha. I don't exactly know what it means. But they would say the Aseret Hadibrot with a bracha. But you don't observe them. You're a bunch of hypocrites. So the character, look at those Jews there. They say they're big talkers. The Ten Commandments, yeah, right. They don't even keep them. Right? They step on them with their heels, right? Akev. We step on them. Lo tisat Hashem elashech. They use God's name in vain. They swear in God's name. I don't mean swear like an oath in a court. I mean when they're mad at somebody, Lo tignov. Look at their business practices. Lo tachmod. They're jealous. They're full of thievery. Okay, and see how they treat their parents. Kaveda avicha v'rimecha. Ubezeh perush shekatapti yavo lashon ta'aromet yoter machon. Ta'aromet is like argument, yelling at you. Right? What do I mean taromet aminim? It's just so there. In other words, taromet. I think what he's saying is implies they're talking to you. If you just say the sectarians will say it's not a taromet, it's what they say to themselves. It's better. Mashen came leperush Rashi lo yit yashev lashon mitra mim heitev. The language doesn't make sense. So I just find this explanation to be like mind-boggling. It's just. Yeah, you see whatever that the reason they canceled the Aseret Hadibrot was because people weren't observing them. Wow. Anyways, okay, and you know what? If you take his explanation, so we're in Surah now, and Baba, no, you don't observe them. We're in the heart of you don't observe them. I don't think that's the way that's not the standard explanation, which he himself says. But I think it's really. When you say something, you got to mean it. We don't mumble words in the Siddur, and when we mumble words in the Siddur, that's not so good. So that's very nice. Okay, let's just say one idea, and then please God will pick up. Yeah.
Just for your information, the art scroll does have the Aseret Hadibrot after the Amidah among
Right.
previous
Yeah.
ones.
So somebody asked me this. I mentioned this in Shul on Yontif, and somebody said, "Oh, can you print it in the Siddur?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Yeah, the art store they have it printed." So I don't know. I mean, I assume they're saying as long as you don't say it, it's part of the tefillah. But and it's obviously part in Birchat, but I actually can hear the argument. Once it's in the Siddur, it's in the Siddur. But okay, I'm not gonna, our school has their poskim, and obviously if they feel it's fine. So I don't think it's such a big issue. But I just think it is cute. And I don't know. I'm looking I have the RCA Siddur. Let me just quickly check. The RCA Siddur has the Ani Mami, the 13 principles of the Rambam, the Sheish Sechirot, the 16 are to remember every day Shabbos, the Rambam's principles, and they do not have the Aseret HaDibrot. So those who want one that's more in keeping with the simple pshat of the Gemara, by the Koran Siddur, right? Our school, they take liberties with how do we interpret the Gemara. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, okay, yes.
You want to know how it goes all the way to the other extreme, and probably these days they have special services on Shavuot to say the Aseret.
Yeah, listen, the Rambam writes, it's very important. The Rambam writes the Aseret HaDibrot is the Ikarim of Judaism. Now, I say that because it's the Rambam who says you're not supposed to stand to make it more important. Of course, it's more important. The Ten Commandments are more important than much of the Torah, obviously. Now, but it doesn't, but on a halakha, in other words, every word of the Torah is divine. Every word is very important. Missing one word of the Torah is possible. The Rambam says you're not allowed to stand for the Aseret HaDibrot unless you stand for the Sefer Torah or whatever. That's not their practice. You're not allowed to. Now, we don't follow that Rambam, but even the Rambam, we do stand for the Aseret. We do make a big deal out of it. But even the Rambam admits these are the main essence of Judaism. What Gemara was objecting to was making it part of our daily tefillot. Right. So how do you put that in modern terms? What do you extend? It means I can't print it in the Siddur. That sounds like it's going a little bit too much, which is what Art Scroll said. You can't put it in the Siddur. Like they're not, so, yeah, the Ten Commandments are important. And they're more important than other things, right? Although that was part of the shir that Gila Rosen gave, and why these 10? Like, why is kashrut not mentioned? Why the holidays not mentioned? Okay, that's not for now, but it's their important question. But there is something special about the Aseret HaDibrot, and the minhag of Klal Yisrael. We do read it on Shavuos. That's what we do. And but by the way, that's a fascinating question. But I just find this is idea. So you have to be very careful. But the most important idea is we're going to say something, keep it. Don't every day I'm going to say in the Siddur Aseret HaDibrot. Okay, I say it once a year, so he doesn't keep it. Once a year I read this prohibition. Okay, so I don't. But if I make an effort, say this is so important, I'm going to say it every single day. You better make sure you are observing it. That's what the Ben Yehoyada is saying. By the way, one thing I forgot to mention is that also the Ramatz later on says that an Avel shouldn't duchen. I don't know, is that the practice? Did anybody tell me? To avelim in the Yud Beit Chodesh, when somebody's mourning for their parent, they also don't have the halakha, they have to cut down on their simcha. So therefore an Abba wouldn't duchen others. So that's your I don't know.
In Israel, the Kohanim that are in Avelut duchen except for Shiva.
Except for Shabbat, even in Shloshim they duchen.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah. I imagine that's what they do here too.
In our show we had a Kohen who's an Avelis and he wouldn't dichen.
Okay, there you go. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, listen, and that's what the Ramah says about a single person, right? Just let me quickly find it. On the single person, ein mochim biyato. The Ramah says a single person should duchen. I mean, he understands why some would say not. He says a single person should duchen. But then I think, maybe it's before. Yeah, here. Achar Shiva Yemei Avelut no say kapah. But this is what David was saying, right? In the week of Shiva, can't duchen. And again, the Ramah quotes Yeshomrim the Chol Avelut Afilu Ad Yud Beit Chodesh Eino no say kapah V'chein noagim. So in Krakow in the 16th century, the people did not duchen for the whole year. That's why I asked, what do people do? So this shul, everybody's going to do. When you establish the shul, you do what you want. That's the way it goes. Okay, I see it's already 10:16. So let's just do a quick review and then I'll take any questions. We started Sela, right? Asking what Sela means. So we have no idea. And nobody knows, ancients, modern, but it makes sense. It's in Tehillim. It doesn't appear in Habakkuk, which I don't know well enough either. Poetry. It's in the books of poetry. So it's some poetic note. It's maybe a sign to the guy on the violin, on the trumpet, because they would sing, they would have instruments. So it's some pausing notion, but it appears all the time, and it's the art scroll and Koran do not translate it. Okay, and then we discussed the notion of Birchas Kohanim. It has to be said only in Hebrew. It was said one way in the temple. They used God's actual name. Of course, the idea that who should duchen, and we spent a lot of time. In Israel, you duchen every day. That's when you're supposed to duchen. The Mishnah says up to 4 times a day on special occasions, on Yom Kippur, Taniyot, because they had Ne'ilah on all fast days, not just Yom Kippur. That's not our practice. Then we discussed a little bit of the Mamadot. Every Jewish person was one of 24 groups, and they would go to the shul, whatever. When the Kohanim were in the Beit HaMikdash, because the Kohanim are representing the entire people, so you'd have representatives from the people, and they would daven and fast and say creation, because ilmele mamadod lo nivru shamayim v'aretz. This is the purpose of God's creation. At the mamadod, they would duchen every day, and then this strange custom we have in Chutz La'aretz, at least Ashkenazim have, the Sephardim do duchen here every day to duchen only on Musaf of Yontif, because we're too upset, we're too sad, worrying about our economic well-being. Even on Shabbos, a really tragic sad Ramah. Perhaps we should or can extend that to a single person, to somebody in mourning. And then we spent a little bit of time just talking about the Aseret Dibra, which was, as you see, used to be part of the daily service in the temple, just like Birchas Kohanim. It was removed, the standard explanation, so we shouldn't we shouldn't say the rest of the Torah is not so important. And then the Ben Yoda with this fascinating interpretation, as we have to observe it properly. Okay, then we take a look at any questions. Mana tastes like honey cake, so perhaps the dairy was added to evoke the land of Israel. Okay, yeah, they say that chalav udvash comes from that. That could be, but that doesn't explain the reason, right? The reason that they couldn't make meat kosher. Like, what do you mean they couldn't make meat kosher? They had the manna. That's what they want to. I don't really understand, but yes, the mini honey cake and dvash. What's the pasuk? Tachat l'shonech. Dvash v'chalav tachat l'shonech. So that's one of the reasons they give for that. According to the Mishnah, right, Birchas Kohanim, we explained that. The question is why the chief rabbinate did not declare public fast this past winter when it was the driest winter. I have no idea. I'm assuming, David, I don't know, because they are very good at desalination, that Israel doesn't need the water they once did. That's not probably the real reason, probably, but I want to be melamed zchut on them, that why they did it. I remember January 1991, before the first Gulf War. I was learning in the Aguda at the time at night. It's where I learned at night. I dressed the same way I dressed there, but there wasn't a sort of modern Orthodox dress. I would learn in the Aguda every night. I have developed a relationship with Reb Lowy, the Rebbe of the Aguda. I think he liked me a little bit. I used to come every night to learn. So I said to him, we should have a special Tehillim, because America said, what did they say by January 15th? We should institute like special Tehillim. Like, who knows what's going to be? This is terrible. And the Scud missiles, Halavai, that's all we had today. It's not something, I don't know. It's very hard for rabbis to institute new things. I don't know what to tell. The students of the Grub did not move to the Galil. Oh, and according to this statement, because the Hasidim prevail, so in many Batei Knesset and Sfat, there's no. It's very interesting. I did not know that until Rav Shar Yishev Kohen became the chief rabbi of Haifa. The custom of Haifa was not to duchen. Interesting. Rav Shar Yishev enacted the entire city of Haifa duchen every day. Very interesting. Thank you for that. The blessing must be ba'aba. Yes, as we discussed in the Singer Siddur. I don't know what's that Siddur. Why am I not familiar with it? Which I grew up with. In South Africa, as in most Jews committed to the British Commonwealth. Maybe that's why I've heard. The Aseret Dibra appears on page 87. Right, right. It appears in the Siddur, but they don't say it. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Any comments, questions, criticism, vakasha? And okay, Rabbi Leibtag, 11:15 on Sunday morning. And please God, we should Shabbat Shalom. We should hear good news and all good things. Okay, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Okay. Shabbat Shalom.